Hey folks, this is Clayton Collins. I'm the CEO at HousingWire, and it's time for a repeat guest alert. So today I am bringing back Greg Schwartz, the CEO of Tomo, to talk about what's transpired in his business over the last 2 years since he joined me on this podcast. We talk about some of the leading indicators that he's seeing in his business today in terms of lock and application volume, the investments that he has made in technology and AI in his business over the last 2 years. And most importantly, we talk about leadership and a love for the mortgage and housing market. This industry needs leaders. It needs wartime leaders, and it needs folks who know how to build and scale. And we have an honest conversation about some of the qualities that leaders in the mortgage industry need to really win in this space, then how to communicate and bring that message and culture into your organization. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Greg Schwartz, the CEO of Tomo. Greg, welcome back to the Powerhouse Podcast.
Clayton, it's great to be with you.
Dude, I just realized as I said that last time you were on this podcast, it was called Housing News, which we have I think more appropriately rebranded as Powerhouse. As we're not here just to talk about the news, we're talking about leadership and building companies. I think that's a more appropriate title, Powerhouse.
Yeah, I feel powerful being on Powerhouse. This is fun.
Well, branding is working. Well, Greg, welcome back. I'm thrilled to talk with you. Last time we had a conversation on air was in 2022, and I went back and listened to a little bit of it, and it's like, oh my God, I forgot what it was like to be in February of 2022. I think at that point you were 1 week into starting to bring some team members back into the office, and we were still, talking about all these like COVID hangovers, and we were also in a more attractive interest rate environment at that moment. But it's been a long 2.5 years.
What we have learned in the meantime, right? I think about that and reflect on a whole generation of us. We've been through so much in building teams and managing people, in learning cost control, in operating in high and low interest rate markets, in a flood. Remember, in 2022, all I heard about was people lining up at open houses and having traffic jams.
Yep. Well, that's been the whole story of Tomo, though, right? Like, you're a COVID era founded business. So like the Tomo story has always been in a period of rapid change.
Yeah. Hey, there's talking, about leaders personally. There are folks that are, we always say this, optimized to being a wartime leader. That is when there's a lot of different change coming at you. And those that are optimized for stable times. I think every single one of us that do mortgages as a CEO, as a sales leader, as a capital markets leader, or talking to customers have become a wartime leader because of all the change that's headed our way.
Do you think this is an industry that, is actually amenable to leadership that's not wartime? Like, can you be a non-wartime leader and sell mortgages?
You probably can't, right? Because there's a cyclical business if there ever was one. And it's the most frequent question I get asked is, can you build a sustainably profitable mortgage company? And can you have a stable, predictable mortgage company? And the answer is resoundingly yes. It can be done. You just have to be very, very deliberate in what you invested in, how you spend your time.
Well, let's talk about the strategy at Tomo, because when we talked in 2022, very, very purchase focused. And while there's volatility in originations of mortgages, purchase wildly or like very much more stable than the refi market.
Yeah. Hey, we're students of history, and we've been studying the mortgage industry, throughout our careers and playing in it. And when we started with a white piece of paper to design what Tomo was going to be, it was to address a few specific cyclical patterns that we'd seen. One is having a business that goes from profitability to lack of profitability based on interest rate cycles is an unattractive business. It's unattractive to company founders and investors, but also to the people that work in them. So the intention from the earliest days was to see if we couldn't build a purchase-based lender that was world's best at generating the more difficult mortgage product sometimes a less profitable mortgage product, but a more stable, predictable one. We sell, this stuff, you talk about it, between 4 and 8 million homes in America every year. So there's a few million mortgages to be done, conventional down the middle for purchase, and there always will be. And that was the founding focus of the company, and still is.
Okay, so let's go back to our conversation about wartime CEOs. We did our first podcast in 2022. I asked you to come back on air in 2023, but you said, Clayton, I'm in the salt mines. Give me some time to build. So, Greg, tell us about how you have spent the time since we were last on air, and what's transpired at Tomo, and give us a glimpse.
Yeah. Hey, from 22 to 24 now, we went back to the salt mines. It's a company tone that we like to use, which is you got to go in there and you got to chip away in mortgage at improvement after improvement. And the focus is to fundamentally have a lower cost to originate a mortgage than anyone else in the market by leveraging automation software. Before we use the AI letters, a bunch of AI that's built in-house. And can we produce a mortgage consistently with lower expense and higher quality? And we like to name things after referential companies and leaders. So we call this Project Costco, which is to have a beautiful differentiated experience that people love. People love those 99-cent hot dogs.
Somehow I knew you were going to hot dogs on that one.
I've never had a 99-cent hot dog at Costco. I probably should have, maybe.
I'm more of a Sam's Club guy. I don't even have the Costco membership.
Yeah,
I'm going to offend somebody by that, though. We're definitely going to get hate letters over me saying I don't have a Costco membership.
Yeah, you might get a free one, maybe. I live in Seattle, so you can't live in Seattle and not have a Costco membership. But a beautiful differentiated experience that people love, that they rate highly, yet is hyper efficient. And that's what we've spent the last two and a half years doing, really, is getting our costs under control, speeding up our underwrite, building our digital tools in-house, and making sure we have a sterling net promoter score.
So your strategy has been very centric on going through the agent to access the homeowner, correct?
Yep.
So over the last 2 years, how have you balanced trying to work with these agents and referral partners while also doing this big, technology build with Project Costco?
Yeah. So agents, I think, want the same thing we all want from mortgage. They want an efficient, fast process with great communication from the lender and from their own customers. They want it to close on time. And they want their customers to have the most buying power they possibly can. So if we can spend less, frankly, in labor on the underwrite and the sales process and give more back to the customer, they're generally really well aligned with us. And they have memories, they being a broad descriptor of agents. I talk to agents who are still talking about deals that they're irritated by that a big national lender did 12, 13, 15 years ago. So we still operate that every deal is our first and our last potential deal with an agent.
Those scars, they don't go away. Agents remember interactions, even as people change, ownership changes, technology changes. There's scars from the 2000s that just won't go away.
Yeah, and what we've learned is fault doesn't matter when you're in a service business, which we are in. At the end of the day, it's success of the transaction and the friction it took to get there or didn't take there to get there, which is we prefer not to have the friction. And it doesn't matter whether or not someone bought a boat in the middle of a housing transaction and blew up their credit. In the process, it sits with us. The accountability sits with us. And so we just have to figure out how to make it a great process every day.
So, Greg, as a leader and as you've had your head down in the salt mines, what does that look like for you as CEO? Like, how are you working with your team? How were you working with your team through this really challenging period that was this rapidly rising rate environment coupled with low inventory and low transaction volume? Like, where did your personal energy go as a leader?
Yeah, that's never been a problem for me. I got a little Mighty Mouse when I wake up in the morning. And I'm a mission oriented dude, and I'll anchor to our mission, which I don't know if I've ever told you the actual mission of the company, the purpose of it. It's very heartfelt, which is to get more Americans on the magic wealth building ladder of real estate. And that's how most Americans build their wealth. 70% of America's wealth is in the equity in their home. And that's how we make progress in society, is getting more folks on that wealth building ladder. And our part at Tomo is to do that by bringing down the cost to buy a home, both in closing costs and fees, and an ongoing interest rate. And so that's kind of a big, audacious mission and goal. And that's what gives the company the jets. Is it's not just about turning volume or making a buck. The people that come to work here understand that it's a startup. It's going to be a little less consistent every day because we're inventing and changing day after day. But it's purpose driven. And that makes my job easier because I get to anchor to something bigger than me.
I want to come back to that mission. But I also want to kind of peel back a layer first on your day-to-day leadership. So sure. We've seen you in several iterations of your career, from being the president of media marketplaces at Zillow. I'm at least aware of a couple of boards that you sit on. You're an executive leader. So in a startup, how do you kind of interject yourself or not in the technical part of the business, or working directly with your agent partners? Like, where does the energy of Greg Schwartz go in the company, and how do you put this passion to work from a practical standpoint?
Yeah. So I'll give you the energy part, I guess, in more detail. The first is, and this is for all of us, and we know it. So this is not unique, but we all know it. We just have to have the discipline to do it. And I'm working on this one, which is we got to take care of ourselves and our health first, right? And so we have to sleep well enough. We have to eat well enough. And if you're not exercising 5 days a week, you're not serious about taking care of yourself. You're just not, because we all know we feel better when we do those things. And so, and then you got to have your family time, whatever your structure is. And if you're not doing it, you're not going to be a whole executive at work. So I've learned that. It's taken me, decades, I think, to get that in balance. And then, at work, a CEO or founder's job is set standards. It's not to do every role. It's not to be in every detail, but it's to set a clear set of expectations and standards, which are unbending. And I'll go back to this word, that are militant, because the difference between blah, blah, blah at most corporations, which most corporate talk is blah, blah, is not worth much more than the paper it's printed on. And things that become culture and repeatable and actually change downstream behaviors is the dedication, consistency, and militancy of the most senior leaders in demanding those standards. And I'll hit this one, and you're a really successful leader, so I'm sure you've seen it. I believe most folks will go to the median of a culture. You got a few angels, you got a few devils, metaphorically. Most folks are decent people at a company, but if the culture is bad and sloppy, they'll ease into sloppiness. And if the culture is militantly precise and demanding with expectations of precision, they'll operate that way. They're looking around to see how to operate. And so that's the thing. If there was anything, whether I spend time on technology or talking to agents or business development, sure, I go where I'm needed by the company, but my job every single day is to set elite standards and hold folks accountable to it. And we can talk about the OKR system whenever you want or never, but that's the tools we really use.
Okay. So, let's be specific. Like, what are the standards you hold your team to, and when and how do you communicate those to new hires or folks that have been with you for 4 years where there's reinforcement needed?
Yeah. Over and over and over. just because a metric or a standard has been grinded into your own mind to the point where you're starting to get nauseous because you're saying and articulating these things so many times, it doesn't mean other folks, your team, has heard you. Doesn't mean you've communicated effectively. So, hey, we use a standard tool called objectives and key results.
Yep.
and kind of made famous at Google. And so
And
we
that's the
said,
OKR system is also part of the EOS entrepreneurial operating system, right?
which I'm less familiar with EOS, to tell you the
Okay.
truth, because I like to have the simplest solutions we possibly can. And so we found OKRs, when John Doerr wrote his famous book, and it's simple enough that everyone can in a single session can master it, and that's what I want. And that's what I want, because it's not about the tool; it's about the use of the tool. We like to say, and so for us, we set quarterly and annual objectives, hard, strenuous objectives that you might miss. And we put them on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard these objectives are. And 10 is the most difficult, most amazing performance of your career, and 1 would be the easiest. A 6 is what we'd like to set standards to, which is going to be, it's going to be tough. You're going to have to grind there. It's going to be salt miney, but if you get there, it's going to feel really good. So we set our goals to 6s or 7s. And then everyone has to have if I set the high end corporate objectives, then the key results or the measures, the projects are then listed below those objectives. And we hold everyone accountable to that, certainly on a monthly and sometimes a biweekly basis. And they've got metrics they have to hit, and you can't escape.
So I'm guessing the OKR is very customized for the role in the organization, but like ultimately, mortgage lender, is production one of the key result outcomes, like a number that you want to hit in terms of origination volume, or am I thinking about this the wrong way?
No, always. Hey, you always have a target production, but I don't find that very useful, because what great OKRs do is they identify the innovation that will make that production possible, in my mind.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of what I was leading to, is like, how do you set goals or OKRs around an output that's controlled by an input you don't have complete control over. So like
Yeah.
we know that I'll speak for myself before putting words in your mouth. We did not hit our 2024 numbers that I set for the organization in January, because the market, wasn't quite as rosy as we expected 2024 to be. Sorry, my crystal ball didn't really work on that one. So how do you set production numbers or manage to production numbers when there's economic or other outside influences on an organization's ability to get there?
Okay. I'm going to say this with love, Clayton, and kindness. We don't accept outside inputs like market conditions as an acceptable determinant of performance.
Okay.
Okay. Don't accept it. I don't accept, when I was working at a big company, international company, I don't accept currency valuation changes as an acceptable impact on performance. It's not acceptable. It's our job as leaders and as performers, as individuals, to figure our way forward. And that's setting the standards. And we have to innovate, and we have to change, and we have to figure out new lines of business, and we have to pivot. And that's what iteration is. And that's what it takes to succeed in this rough and competitive and demanding a market. In our case, sterling service, sterling customer experiences. So one of the inputs is net promoter score. We want to have the highest net promoter score in the entire mortgage industry, every quarter, every time. And I know if we become known for we currently have an 80 net promoter score, needs to get better. We're focused on
80 is pretty world class on NPS.
Yeah, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And every one of us reads every single customer satisfaction survey, and down to the loan officers, down to the processors. And every time we have an imperfect CSAT or NPS, the CEO and the team that work on it, including the loan officers and the processors and the underwriters and their leaders, we sit down and we talk about it. And so we don't do that again. And in the long duration, that wins business. That's an example of controlling your outcome, right? If you build the world's most beloved events and deliver the world's most valuable content, in time you will grow at a higher speed and take your unfair share. We love that term, unfair share of your total addressable market.
Mm-hmm.
It's not acceptable to to use market factors. It is acceptable to take a risk and it not work. It's acceptable to launch a new business, a new tactic, a new marketing strategy that no one's done or you've never done before and it not work. That happens all the time. And we applaud people for that kind of.
Oh, and absolutely. And I'm not trying to say that market conditions should be an excuse for not hitting targets, but there is, in my point of view, in working in this industry, it is important to be able to understand the drivers behind performance and also know when a market force has some influence over outcome, because I've seen it done time and time again where people assume it's a product issue, but actually it's a different driver that's like influencing the business outcome. So I wasn't so much trying to say, Greg, what's the excuse for underperformance or what's an acceptable excuse, but like understanding market drivers, because they are real.
Yeah. Hey, this is a complicated business, as you know. You've got customer issues. Being affordability is the big driver right now. We're a market that we're price takers. We're not price givers in many ways. So interest rates impact us a whole bunch. It's a pretty competitive market. I don't mean to be so militant that it's unfeeling, but we care a lot about market share.
Yep. Nope. I think that's a great measure. So like, okay, let's go back to the mission about helping, and I'm not going to remember your mission word for word, but like helping people build wealth through housing. Succinct enough. So how do you think about some of the surveys and some of the headlines that have kind of pointed at a societal or generational doubt that homeownership is accessible or will be the tool that they can use to build homeownership? Because that seems to be a theme that's popping up with part of the millennial generation that's been the part that's been left behind. We do understand that millennials have been the largest share of home purchasers for most of the last cycle. And there also seems to be some doubt in Gen Z if homeownership is going to be accessible or the tool that will help them build wealth. Is that something you guys talk about or think about, the societal views of housing wealth?
Yeah, and yes, and there's two big drivers we think of it. Hey, there's an affordability crisis. We know that.
Yep.
In many markets of the country, it's never been more imbalanced that is income to the cost of housing. And so people are appropriately concerned. And then we're all living it and you cover it. Gosh, I got our home insurance renewal the other day. I don't know if you've seen yours recently. It's really tough, right? Ours is up 30% year on year. So affordability is both purchasing and maintaining a home has never been more challenged, and people should be really thoughtful about that. I don't know. We see in our proprietary work and what I hear on the phones, the same yearning and connection to wanting to build a life in a home where we kind of joke you can put the holes in the walls by putting some pictures up and you can paint the place and you can start to build some equity. I've seen as much data saying that millennials look like boomers in their desire to own a home. They're just concerned about the ability to own that home. And the answer is we've got to build. The only way forward, we've got a growing population through both birth rate and immigration, and we're millions of homes underbuilt. You guys cover that. We're millions of homes underbuilt, and that's the only way forward to bring affordability down is we have to create a few million homes.
Yeah, I think it's, if you're a leader, wartime leader or other type of leader in the housing industry, you have to have some love for this industry and the impact that housing has on the overall U.S. economy, U.S. citizens, housing wealth, family wealth, access to education, access to health, like all the great things that come through the stability that homeownership brings. So these stress points around affordability and being underbuilt, I mean, those are the things that wear on you if you're someone who really loves and believes in the impact of housing.
Yeah. That's real, because we've been talking about lack of volume, lack of building for 10 years now. at least I've paid attention to the last 10 years,
Yep.
and we haven't made a ton of progress. There's one other thing which is fun, which maybe we can help with, which we're trying to help in our own little way, which is we call it the Pinterest effect. And we
I,
see a whole generation of home buyers, and we see this in a lot of our research, who struggle to save for a down payment. And I hear this theme over and over again. I saved and saved and saved, and it still always seemed elusive because homes became more expensive during that period. So I never got there. I see you smiling.
I
So
know exactly where you're going. Yeah.
yeah, and so what we're starting to talk about and plan for is the counter Pinterest movement, which is starter homes get us on the wealth building ladder of the leverage of a mortgage product. There's no better debt product probably in the world than US fixed rate 30-year purchase mortgages. It's a non-callable note. Even if the asset price goes down, as long as you make your payments, no one comes and takes it away from you.
Yep. Yet it's the thing people fear the most about like where their home price is going to go. And in reality, like in a short term window, not a very impactful thing. But the Pinterest effect. So we're talking like we've all seen the beautiful granite countertops and the rose gold handles on the cabinetry. Is that what we're talking about here? An expectation for where housing is when you start on the ladder.
Yeah, it's holding an entire generation back. The expectation of what I see on Pinterest and TikTok of what my home should look like, and then what I can afford and where I can afford it, holds millions of first-time home buyers back from starting with a starter home that may not be perfect to what my visual is from Pinterest, but we know that's not real. And it holds people back from buying in and starting to build equity. Yep. And that's the way you afford that desirable home is you start with a home you can afford, you build a little equity, you get in an appreciation cycle, and you've got something to trade up from.
And I mean, if we're really going to like preach to the choir here and dissect the need for more entry level affordable housing, it needs to come back to the fact that yes, we can have entry level housing that doesn't have the granite countertops or the white oak floors, but it needs to be in good condition, and that's one of the issues with most housing stock in most markets of the U.S. that's actually in like the entry level strike price, and we know that's different in every market. So I'm not going to like generalize it for the whole United States, but let's just say it's in like the 200 to 400 range. A lot of that inventory is under maintained or needs improvement, or for some other reason outside of the fact it doesn't have granite countertops is not attractive to this entry level first time home buyer.
Yeah, I mean, we'd apply the YouTube effect to that too. How much of our lives do we learn how to do through YouTube? And hey, in a time of imbalance between income and housing costs, sweat equity may be required to get into that first home and get on the ladder. And I'm not judging whether people do it or not. I mean, we do loans for folks every single day at Tomo for folks that are getting in a home and they're going to pull the hammer and repair the roof and do some work to start moving. And we see repeat buys from folks like that all the time. I do want to make sure that we get to the pretty exciting part, Clayton, because I see the time ticking. And, one of the things I wanted to say is we're starting to see the repair. We're starting to see the bounce.
The repair on these entry-level homes, the repair on the industry turmoil that we've muscled our way
the
through.
Repair on the industry turmoil. Can I give you some leading indicators that
Please
we're starting to see? Yeah, so we look at a whole bunch of leading indicators, and let's start with the base one. We kind of tier these straight up. We use Google Trends to look at housing searches, right? Because Google is still the great tracking machine. I think it's the greatest representation of what we're interested in. And the day after those rate cuts was the highest single day of searches of mortgage rates, the category of mortgage and mortgage rates, in 5 years. So it was kind of like a peak period for a 5-year period. we saw 106% increase in the traffic to our rate tables on Tomo, the rate pages on Tomo. And we've seen that sustain. We saw a pretty quick clip to like a 30-ish% pickup in pre-approvals, which is a great leading indicator, right? Because that's the quickest thing. I'm pretty serious and pretty qualified. I want to go out and start looking at houses. So we saw a 30% pickup in pre-approvals. And then it typically takes us 4, 6, 8 weeks to see that wash through into locks. But we've seen a double-digit pickup in locks already. And we track the states we operate in, the products we operate in. We have a 10-year tracker using some third-party, data from Optimal Blue. We do a 10-year tracker on lock volume, and we saw last week as a 25% improvement on the prior week, and ahead of 2022 in lock volume in the states we monitor.
That's really interesting. So that's that lock volume tracker is something from OB, Optimal Blue, you said?
It is.
Okay. Yeah, we're always looking for the best like leading indicators that we should be reporting on or monitoring on HousingWire. That might be one we need to look at a little bit closer.
I look at it every morning, every single morning.
Last week, October 1st, we hosted the HousingWire IMB Summit here in Dallas, and we heard some of this, these positive feelings from some of the folks that spoke. So Mike Dubeck, who leads Planet Home Lending, he was pretty excited about some record lock and application numbers, like it kind of in history of the organization that he saw the week before the summit. We heard some similar feedback loops from Sean Panosian from Rate. It was sharing what he's seeing in his team, and several other speakers talked about some monitored locks, others monitored applications, and starting to see numbers really pick up. But if we go back to that day when you said that mortgage rate search volume spiked on Google after the Fed did the 50 bip reduction, kind of given up some ground on rates. Like, do you see rates kind of going back up in the last 2 weeks of having any impact on some of these search terms and pre-approvals, not coming to fruition? Or are you seeing kind of pull through from pre-approval to application?
Yeah, not seeing a negative impact.
Okay, good.
We've seen rates pick up a little bit with the jobs numbers and everything. But it's about psychology, because I think most folks know on this pod, our rates didn't go down the day of. It was pre-priced in. I think we were up 3 or 4 or 5 bips the next day.
This is the podcast where we're allowed to use bips and acronyms, and think everyone understands the difference between the 10-year and 2-year and impact on mortgage rates. This is the show we're allowed to make those assumptions, but usually we try to explain it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, so our rate went nominally up the day after the Fed announcement, because it had already been pre-priced into the market. This is about psychology. It's about people feeling like they're not making a mistake, that they're not going to embarrass themselves, that they're not going to be at the wrong side of things. And so we see optimism continuing to flow through. This weekend was our largest weekend ever in the history of the company. I'd like to chalk some of that up to good, solid execution in 3 years of salt mine style investment in technology and process and speed and consumer experience, but it also was because customer interest is now elevated.
All right. So let's take that elevated customer interest and apply it to operational action. So as the leader of Tomo, what do you do now that's different than you may have done a quarter ago in terms of hiring, marketing, give me a view of like how the chapter turns as you start to see these really positive glimmers of hope.
Yeah, the chapter turns. We've got a bunch of jobs posted because now we'd all operated pretty leanly, and now we're at the point where we're too lean. And if you get too far behind your staff model, Net Promoter Score starts to decline. And that's the negative cycle you never want to be in, right? Because we need word of mouth with real estate agents. to be driving this enterprise forever. And again, they have long memories. So this is a time where you have to make disciplined decisions, which is, do you grow or not? If you don't have the staff in place, do you go into your market? Do you advertise? Do you take the next deal? And it's easy to always take the next deal and shrug your shoulders, but not if it's going to lead to a 1 rating on Google, because that's going to stick for a long time. And so this is where conviction comes in. So one, you have to make sure you have the people and the capital to sustain the staff plan. Great, check, good shape. Two, you have to maintain your people standards, because when we all got lean, we had brilliant, focused, high quality, we call them GOATs at Tomo, greatest of all teams. So we have a GOAT team at Tomo. So we have to make sure we maintain quality now when the recruiting pressure starts to come in. That's where you can fall down very easily. We're not going to do that here, because I want to work with great people. And then you hope that your investments in technology, which in our case it did, made you a much more efficient operator. I'll give you a stat, which I've never shared anywhere. It's kind of like, I don't know, sharing your bank account number, but we hit an all-time high of productivity last month. Our loan officers did 15 purchase loans per person last month, which I've never seen numbers from anyone else. I think it's pretty good. You probably know better.
Excellent. So, all right. So let's, I think you're like going to impress a lot of people with that stat. Okay. So that means that the technology stack and the marketing engine are working. Do you think, so as we talk about adding staff, do you think that you want to maintain that 15 units per originator number, or do you get, and how high can it go before you're worried about CSAT?
Yeah. Hey, those are things we have to keep in balance, right? And we have to also keep the team happy, because we don't want this to be a 7-day-a-week job, and people burn out. Hey, the objective of the company is to use technology to hire the fewest people we possibly can to ensure they have the most stable careers, cyclical, and to return as many of our COGS reductions or our cost reductions back to customers in the form of lower rate. And so we're always trying to balance hiring the next person to writing the next automation. Half of our company are still software engineers and product folks. So that's where investment goes. Yeah.
Can we make the general statement that the mortgage industry is going to employ fewer people at the peak of this cycle than it did the peak of the last cycle? Or do you think you're a unicorn and that you're actually starting to achieve some of the elastic promises of technology where you can scale production volume without scaling headcount? And everyone else is not going to be able to.
In scaling it at a lower rate. Like in the technology business, we call that leverage, right? Leverage from technology. The only way you get to be a digital lender is if you're going to see leverage from your technology investment. That's why we've invested tens of millions of dollars in our stack, right? A homegrown stack. I think it's going to be a tale of two cities. I think there are some folks who are going to see a refi move here who are good sales people, who have good mortgage instincts, and they'll run the same play they always have. And good for them. We'll eat them on the other side of this thing, because it's going to get harder and harder to maintain an old laborious model where you don't pay your people any guarantees. You just pay them variable and you try to keep them on the other side. We pay all of our folks a base salary in every role at the company, and we give them stock and we give them benefits. So we want a team that's durable. I don't think that model, the old model, is going to work for very long. But yeah, this refi boom that's coming, that we all know is coming, a bunch of people will hit the same plays with the same old stack, with the same old process. And there'll be a few companies that have had the wherewithal the last 3 years to have half their effective cost structure go into writing the platform of the future. And that's what we've done, and others have, and we'll take market share.
Yeah, the refi boom or boomlet, as I've heard someone refer to it as, that's going to be one of the most interesting times in this cycle, because this is a topic that came up on stage at the IMB summit. Is the servicers have really geared up, and they're technology and process development over the last few years. We have three servicers in this country who are either over or approaching $1 trillion in servicing volume. And that level of MSR volume was not built up just to watch it, march right back out the door when somebody else calls for a refi. Like, there are true processes and strategies built to retain and recapture that business. And I think that's going to be, like, by far the most interesting thing to watch in the next 6 to 9 months is, does the promise of AI and tech-enabled service and recapture strategy actually work? Or does that volume march right on out the door when, this world of this army of originators starts calling and offering conversations to talk about refi?
It's just going to be really interesting, isn't it?
It's going to be a battle. I mean, it's a true, like, David versus Goliath scenario of, like, Goliath being these big servicers and David being, brokers and LOs across all channels, beating the phones.
And the answer is probably going to be, it's going to take a while because the pie is going to be big enough. It's going to take a little while to see one's way to that answer, I think.
Yep.
Okay. I'm happy with our purchase focus and our purchase position, though.
I did. I gave you a hard time on the last interview. I said, Greg, when this next refi wave comes up, are you gonna say, like, all right, so now we have this big refi population to serve, or are you going to be able to? I mean, but I also gave credence to the fact that you may have purchase customers who come to you for refi. So how are you thinking about that? As there's probably quite a few loans in your origination book from the last 2 years that are approaching a logical conversation point.
They may already be calling. So this, I think you may like this. So it's the right question. So we run a pretty transparent company, and on hard questions, we talk about them quite openly. So in our next all hands, we're running a debate, actually. We've got 2 debate teams, high school style debate teams. Should we refi or not refi? That is the question. And so we've got 2 groups of, as we call them, Tomo owners, kind of cute, Tomo owners.
You're great with the witty names.
Yeah, that's what we do. We've got 2 teams debating this one out to see if it's something we should do. I don't love saying no to customers calling. I'll admit it would be quite distracting, and I'm very concerned about being vacuumed in to what I've been critical of others for.
Well, you'll have to update us, and I'll share this episode with our newsroom because they should be calling on you to see how this debate goes, because that'll be refi or no refi. Still fascinating to kind of put some of that power in the hands of your team and in deciding the path forward.
Yes, it'll be fun.
Okay, Greg, super quick final question. So we have gotten a glimpse into Greg Schwartz as a CEO, as a leader. As we look forward to 2025 and you look forward to the next stage of growth for Tomo, what are you working on personally? Like, what part of your leadership style, what part of your CEO toolkit do you think is most important for you to lead this business to truly get to the next level?
Yeah, so that's a big, heartfelt question, isn't it? I'm working on a lot of things as a leader myself in my skilling. And I get references from a lot of places. And we talked a little bit about this. I have this weird belief in mentors. I'll do this very quick, which is everything we're doing has been done before us, and it's on us to recognize patterns and optimize them. So the best thing you can do is have mentors. I've got quite a few mentors, not all of whom I know. Some of them I know through your podcast, or some of them I know through reading their biographies. So I look for things I can take from others. I was just hearing from a mentor who isn't alive anymore. The guy that founded Seagram's, Brofman, was on the Founders podcast. Another podcast, but adjacent to you guys.
Founders is an excellent show.
It's a great show. And I was just reading about the exacting standards of Brofman, and I was inspired by that. So holding standards and communicating them clearly is something I'm working on. Then in my own case, making sure that we're looking around the corner in our product development and technology is probably the second area. It's surprisingly difficult to access much of the data that we need to automate mortgage underwriting and processes. And so I'm spending a lot of time with vendors and with data sets myself, trying to make sure that the team is thinking broadly and big enough to deliver on this promise of getting more Americans into a less expensive mortgage.
That's great. And Greg, that answer actually gives a lot of value to me because the definition of mentor has always been something that I've found a little bit elusive. And there are a lot of people and executives that I've looked to in the same way that you just demonstrated, like as a mentor without ever breaking bread or sitting down in the same room, being able to learn from somebody from their experiences. You can do it through books and podcasts. I've just never found that elusive definition of, does that count as mentorship? I was at an event last week or 2 weeks ago now, and the CEO of Acrisure, Greg Williams, spoke about building his insurance brokerage business, the business that is like preparing for a public offering, $8 billion in revenue, and how he built it. And I have pages of notes that I learned from this short talk. I would definitely put him in the category of mentor from some of the things I learned from his experience, even though we never actually shook hands.
I love it. I love it. You got to learn from others, right?
Absolutely.
And why limit yourself to the people that will answer your phone call?
Love it. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today for episode of Powerhouse. I'm thrilled to hear about some of these early indicator metrics and learned a lot from your leadership and approach. Thank you.
Yeah, great to speak with you, Clayton.
Boom, it's a wrap.